Alright, so I promised I was going to make this video, and here we go, we're going to make this video. And the video is going to go over why I not only hate, but just utterly disdain white nationalism as an ideology. And I have even more hatred and disdain for the adherents to it, the white nationalists. So I'm going to just start out by quickly explaining what white nationalism is. It's obviously implied by the name, but we'll go through it for a second. And then I'll tell my story of my kind of journey through white nationalism and being exposed to the adherents and the ideas. And then I'll give a few criticisms of it. And the one thing I ask is that people stick with this whole video. If you're listening to this, I'm not sure how long it's going to be. I'm not really worried about the length, but just stick with it to the end. So white nationalism is a ideology that white people, right, are going to basically come together regardless of their cultural differences, right? It doesn't matter if they're French or if they're Serbian or if they're English, they're Anglo, they're Scottish. They're going to come together and they're going to they're either going to kick out all non-whites from area and then take it over and have a demographic that the main function of it is to remain racially homogenous, or else they're going to move themselves to a place. They're going to move to some given area of the country, or they're going to move outside of the country, and they're going to create this ethno-state, this state that is just driven by ethnicity and race. And so I'll take you through my journey because I was kind of following this ideology for a brief period of time a few years ago. So what happened was through my experiences in life with women and things like this, I ended up getting into some of these red pill groups, right? Trying to figure out explanations for why things were going wrong with me in my relationship and why I wasn't really able to attain what I thought that I should be able to in a reasonable society within the sexual dating market. And I seen other guys who I felt should be able to attain more were not living up to their standards in the sexual dating market. And I went down this red pill rabbit hole. And the red pill, it brushes up against race realism. And so it was only a matter of time until I started to pipeline into that community and become aware of certain chosenite ethnic groups that were overrepresented in the media, in banking and finance, and in the pornography industry, and yada yada, everything subversive. And I began to react to these people. I seen how they used immigration as a weapon, and these white nationalists, they had a lot to say about it. They were showing documentaries, and I got on Twitter, right? And through Twitter, I got into this community, and I started sharing information with them, and I was learning and reading. They were telling me books to read, and I was going through the information. And Twitter is interesting because Twitter, it's a very impersonal platform. You get a certain amount of words that you're able to type, and then it just you put it out there and people can respond to it. They can share it or retweet it, but you're not engaged directly with them. There's time that lapses between posts and responses, and it's not quite as personal. But over time, right, as my belief, or you could call it a faith, right, it almost is like a religion, it grew stronger in this ideology. I started to place myself in closer proximity and to the people that kind of subscribe to this worldview. And I would get onto apps like Telegram where you could discuss in voice chats with people. You could directly talk to them. And I started to notice something about these people. The closer I got to the people who were identifying as white nationalists, I started to make this realization. First of all, they were extremely degenerate, right? A lot of these people were were criminals. They were in and out of jail. A lot of these people were drug users or alcoholics. A lot of them would use really vulgar language, and they would drive around and they would fight one another. They would meet up and fight, or they would character assassinate each other. And of course, the women who were in these communities were the absolute lowest of the low. They were just kind of capitalizing on a fringe market where they could get more attention than they would trying to outcompete other women on Instagram and more normal communities like this, right? So they kind of, like Christopher Columbus discovering a new land, they discovered this niche market where they're basically deified, right? Any white woman, it doesn't matter if she's a single mom, it doesn't matter if she's over 30 years old, 35 years old. It doesn't matter if she's been very promiscuous throughout her life. It doesn't matter if she uses vulgarities, if she's very masculine in her demeanor. She's basically deified for the color of her skin. And now we're going to start getting into the critiques. So white nationalism, above all else, it's materialistic, right? It basically reduces your in-group to skin color. And to a lot of people, they'll show these HBD graphs, like the human biodiversity, and they'll say, oh, okay, you're this amount white, right? You're 95% white. They create some arbitrary threshold. You got to be at least 80% white or something like that. And it just completely ignores the cultural aspect of it, because cultural aspects is not physical. It's something much more abstract. It's something much more arbitrary, right? Like, for example, religion. So you see these different groups who have fought over the ages, like France and Britain, or Serbia and Croatia. They fought over a lot of religion. Ireland and the English, they have a lot of animosity because of historical reasons, because of religious reasons. And then the white nationalists come in and they try to cram these people together. They say, we have to just put aside all our differences because we all have this white skin. We all have these blue eyes, right? And so we're not going to do this. We're just going to cram everybody together. And so it's a materialistic view. It doesn't even really acknowledge language. So they want to put people together who can't even communicate with one another, like the French and the English, or Russians. Some people will even include Russians. And here's the next critique, right? White is a very arbitrary and ill-defined classification. So you get all these infinite regressions into nuanced differences of race, right? Like some people will say, are the Greeks white? Well, they're mongrelized. They're kind of like Turks now. Are the Russians white? No, they're too far east. They're like Mongols. What about Ukrainians? They're kind of brown, right? And then it just goes on and on and on and on. Oh, what about South Americans? They're sort of white. You can bleach them, you know. And they have an ill-defined in-group. They can't really show what properties a person needs to be white and where the line is. They're not able to demonstrate it. So a lot of these white nationalists, they're not even really white. I know the group in the New England area, 131, I guess that was started by a guy who was like half Asian or a quarter Asian or something like that. You get guys like Gypsy Crusader. He's like a Romani gypsy, but he's identifying as a white nationalist. Now, white nationalism, I think it's kind of a geographical thing. It's very popular in the Americas because of the way that Europeans sort of came over to the Americas, and America turned into a bit of a white melting pot. And this is like the mutt meme, you know, the 86% meme. It's like they can't really reconnect with their European roots, and the America itself can't stand in as an ethnos. It's such a young nation, and it's been based in liberalism from the start. It's kind of been not really perceived racially. So these people, they're trying to find some way to define themselves. And the next criticism I have is that white nationalists, they basically limit their viable options for women. And this is why you'll see a lot of white nationalists just turn into incels. And I've called a lot of them out for it. I've said, okay, so your whole view here is that white people are being genocided because they're not having any babies, and they're being replaced by mass immigration and these groups who have much more babies than them. So if you run the experiment out, then it's not really a genocide, but it's a democide. It's a great replacement. And I say, well, why aren't you having babies? And they say, well, the problem is a lot of these guys, they couldn't get with a woman of any race, right? They're incels, and there's too many men. They're outnumbering the females. And they couldn't even get with like a 40-year-old she-boon, let alone they want a white woman of fertile age who isn't vaccinated. And so they've basically guaranteed themselves will be incels. Very, very few people, very few white nationalists are going to find this and crack slip and be able to get what they need to get in order to save their race. The other criticism here is that white nationalism, it creates a reductionistic worldview, much like Marxism, right? I like to often compare it to Marxism. So in Marxism, you have all of history is described through one paradigm. It's the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And this is the working class and the capitalist class. And every single thing gets framed that way. So any sort of racial issues, it gets kind of shoved into the class dichotomy. And reductionism just says all of X can be explained by Y, right? And for white nationalism, this is race. And the specific race dichotomy that they kind of propagate is, or propound rather, is the Aryan and the you-know-who-ish people. And it's been this back and forth battle throughout all of history where one side is virtuous and they're righteous and they're moralistic and they're productive and they go and they get along and they build these great empires, these great civilizations, this great architecture, this beautiful artwork. And then on the other side, the tiny hats, the wandering parasites, they come in and they undermine it and they corrupt it. And these people are just, I do think there's some merit in it. But the problem is that when you try to go outside of this binary, right, and you try to say, well, okay, put it this way, right, white women aren't having any children, and the low birth rates are, first of all, the weapon that is causing us to go extinct. And second of all, it's creating a justification for the mass immigration in the first place. So maybe it's a sex issue, right? Maybe if you fixed the sex issue and you fixed the patriarchy, the race thing would just sort itself out. It would just solve itself. But these guys will ostracize you and they'll call you all kind of names. They'll try to character assassinate you because you're deviating from the reductionist framework that they've concocted. And they do the same thing with like any kind of class dichotomy that you would put forth. Like you say, well, maybe people being this rich, it just really isn't a good thing in general. And they'll attack you for that. And white nationalists, it's also anti-eugenics by necessity. They really don't like eugenics, most of these people. And so you point out to them, you're like, okay, well, you love white people, but the problem is that the only people that are going to stop you from having this white identity come to fruition is other white people. And so what do you do about that, right? You got to cull your own. You got to get rid of all these spiteful mutants who, by happenstance, are mostly white people. And then they say, no, they've been brainwashed. They're victims, right? We're oppressed. This is an oppression narrative. And we don't have to actually cull our own. We just have to kick out this other group and we'll just get along for all time, right? And there's a contradiction in this, right? Because white nationalism, it's an oppression narrative. It says we've been undermined by this group. This group came in and it invaded the polity and it basically, they duped us. They outsmarted us. But then at the same time, they'll turn around and push the supremacy angle. They'll say, we're the greatest people. And we did all this great stuff. We're smarter than everybody. But then how did you get duped? How is it so easy for you to just take the bait, right? The small little group who they don't have any weapons. They just fight with the pen. They're basically the equivalent of girls. They came in and they just gaslighted you into handing your society over to bankers, right? So which is it? Are you oppressed or are you supreme? You can't be both. You're either a victim or you get what you deserve. And nature works like this. Any organism that can't assert itself, right? You can claim to be better than others until you're fucking blue in the face. But if it's not being demonstrated by your actions, right? If the actions say the opposite, then it's the opposite. And so the moral of the story is that white nationalism is kind of a clinging on to some kind of identity that it's been stripped from us, right? All of our culture has been stripped. All of our heritage has been stripped. Our communities have been stripped. And so they cling on to this identity. And it's very materialistic. And it's not going to give you the kind of fulfillment that you need. It's just this angry, knee-jerk reaction. It's reactionary. They react to the flavor of the week. And so they get run around like a puppet, right? Somebody pulling the strings, putting out all this propaganda to make them mad, trainee story time hours, stuff like this. They take the bait every single time, and they just romanticize the white race, right? They don't actually have any reason why they're oppressed. They will kick you out for kind of proposing anything of the sort. And a lot of these people just sit around, they get drunk out of their face, they're all alone, they're atomized, they're isolated, but being white, it somehow gives them like this superiority complex where they think they're better than other people, despite being alcoholic, substance abusers, despite acting like nigs, despite screaming at other people, threatening them, telling them they're going to kill them, pulling guns out on social media, just acting like complete low impulse rejects, acting like these spurgs, yet they still think they're better because they're throwing up Romans and they're reciting these 14 words. It gives people an excuse to act like scumbags, and it's really sad too. I was talking to one guy there yesterday who was one of these white nationalists. And he had a family, I guess, with an Asian woman. He had a couple of kids, and then he supposedly got red-pilled. You know, he's seen some documentaries, like The Greatest Story Never Told or whatever. And now he resents his family. He resents America. He wants to run away to Poland or to Iceland, where he doesn't even speak their language, abandon his family. He's getting drunk every day. Just a complete fucking mess. This is what it does to people's mind when they start thinking like this, right? And so these people, they want to just basically emulate the people that they hate. They don't want to buck them off and get out from under their oppression. They just want to become it. They want to become this like ethnocentric in-group that functions not by merit but by nepotism. And it's all about your blood purity, your 23andMe. It's all about your physical phenotype, the materialism. It's all about running away, which goes back to my last video about white flight. These people always want to run away. They have some kind of fantasy that it doesn't interact with reality at all. Like as if somehow we're just going to kick every beaner and every non-white out of the Americas, and we're just going to have this lily little white ethno state, and we're all just going to return to tradition and our culture, and all these white women, these blue-eyed queens, they're going to frolic in the meadows like, look at me, you know, they're going to be popping out babies, and it's all going to be sentimental, and it's just such utter nonsense. And they also shout down people who compromise to get ahead a little bit, like somebody like Nick Fuentes. Now, I don't necessarily like Fuentes. I don't think his worldview is philosophically rigorous enough. I don't like that he's a Catholic, which I'm going to make a video pretty soon about my opinions on Catholicism or Christianity in general. But I understand that he is a guy who's seen that white nationalism's futile. It never goes anywhere. It hasn't made any inroads in 60 years. And so he's trying something different, and he's getting a little bit of notoriety. He's been around some movers and shakers, and they showed him down for it. They say, don't, you can't compromise on anything. You got to just autistically hold to every single thing. And the whole thing, you say, well, how are you ever going to get anywhere? And they say, well, it's going to be a collapse. There's going to be this catalyst and this great collapse event, right? It's like the collapse cope. And then we're just going to land on top. Somehow everything's going to get so bad because white people hold up society, and now we're dropping out or we're being pushed out, and everything's going to collapse in on itself. And then we're just going to rise from the ashes, and the world will know Uncle Adolf was right. And they wait and they wait and they sit on their hands and they do nothing, and they criticize people who do something, and they just keep saying, it's coming any day. It's coming any day. The catalyst is right around the corner. They're checking their watch. They're checking the clock. They ostracize any smart people from their community. Anybody who has a more comprehensive worldview, they just totally kick them out because they're intellectually lazy. They don't want to learn any more than they have to. They just want to be angry, and they just want to be bound together by hatred and racism. They think that racism alone is sufficient to build an entire worldview. It's not, right? So when you come to them with a completed worldview, they don't want to listen. They don't have the time or the energy or the integrity to want to learn anything new or to listen to alternative takes. They don't want to concede on anything. They don't want to take any of the blame themselves. They're just like women, right? You start to say, hey guys, I want this clown world to stop just as much as you do. However, I think that we should take the responsibility for having let it get this way, right? If we're these great people that we're saying we are, then we're the ones that dropped the ball, right? This other group could have done nothing to harm us if we didn't fall asleep at the wheel, right? When we were supposed to be watching, we got too comfortable, we relaxed, and we let it get away from us. It's our fault. They say, no, it's not our fault. You're being subversive. They did this to us. And I really don't think that much progress will be made until this ideology is completely destroyed. It's full of simps. The 14 words is an ideology of simping by necessity. Women have totally taken over the sphere and monopolized it. They're starting to unionize the attention in the white nationalist sphere. And until white nationalism is dead, until misogyny and the red pill are dead, we're not going to make any progress toward a better world, toward a place where we don't have to live under the plutocratic clown committee. And I think that this is kind of like a call to the listener to help me destroy the arguments of these people. Help me to rally against them. Help me to destroy white nationalism. Just the way that we need to destroy the red pill misogyny community, the way that we need to destroy people like Hammerhand and Undead Chronic and these other grug, individualistic materialists. Help us put their ideologies to bed. Help us put these reactionary ideologies to the electric chair and get rid of them so that we can start to actually do something meaningful, so we can start to create an in-group that is more based in a complete world outlook that can provide people with belonging and meaning, meaningful meaning, culture, right? Shared experience instead of just the color of your eye. So that's all I wanted to say. White nationalism, it's a scam. It's a reactionary position. It feeds into the narrative. It feeds into the zeitgeist. You're just sheep for the slaughter. Stop believing in it. These people are degenerate. If you follow white nationalism, you're going to end up getting doxxed. You're going to end up getting character assassinated. You're going to end up going to prison. It's just a stupid worldview made by stupid Americans who have nothing else to cling to except something material. They have nothing else to cling to except a fucking graph. And it's another cope. It's all based on this big collapse, is based in this eschatological end of days narrative where everything's just going to cave in. It's never going to happen. It never has happened. The cycle theory is bullshit. It's been defunct for 100 years now. It needs to stop. And in its place, we're going to build something proper.